as some people say, hard on families. It's very difficult for a family to stay together. There are many reasons for this. In my own situation, I remember very well going to 5 meetings a week, which is 5 hours, commuting time, preparation time, going out in service. In my case, as a servant in the congregation, I had to spend a great deal of time in committee meetings and so on. I found that I was literally spending 30, 40, and sometimes 50 hours a week, plus working 40 hours a week. So it simply absorbed almost all of my time. So aside from working and going to meetings and so on, there was literally hardly any time left for the family. And so the time factor alone causes problems. I remember rushing to get dinner ready and to eat dinner, and we never washed dishes after dinner. We had to go to a meeting, and by the time we got back, it was often 10:30, and then we didn't feel like cleaning up the kitchen and so on. So the kitchen was a mess until the morning, and then we had to get breakfast, and I had to go off to work, so that left all of that for my wife to do, which was very difficult, very hard on us. And of course, the major impediment, I think, in keeping families together is what often happens is when people become witnesses, both quite often do not become witnesses and in the family. And therefore, you have what they call a divided household. Typically, the wife was a witness and the husband was not. So this caused perpetual conflict, as one would imagine, within the family. Also, what commonly happens is when one begins to have doubts, the other doesn't. So one leaves the society or leaves the organization, the other doesn't. So this not uncommonly causes a divorce. Also, we find that within the society there is a great deal of, for many reasons, immorality going on. And this also serves to divide the family. One is put in many tempting situations within the congregation. So there are many, many reasons why the family is not the solid family the society likes to picture it as.
It's interesting, Jerry, I've noticed in the articles recently in the Society's publications that there's a considerable emphasis on the youth. It seems that they're drawing their attention to the problems amongst the youth, rebelliousness, this, that, or the other thing, certainly warning them against many of the hazards of modern life, drug abuse and so forth, which is very practical advice, obviously. But it indicates to me that there's a considerable degree of problems amongst the youth. Now, that existed when I was serving as an elder. That was the case back then, and I'm sure that some of the things that are maybe taking place today, pressures in school or whatever, seems to be exacerbating this problem because they are definitely turning their attention to this. Now, I remember even my own daughter, she led a very lonely life as a child, really. We discouraged her from having friends apart from those that she had in the local congregation that were also Jehovah's Witnesses. She spent every day in the hall so that she wouldn't have to stand for the national anthem or flag salute. There was all the little activities that were normal to the school child that she could not engage in. She could not engage in birthday parties or any Thanksgiving activity or whatever. It was all a no-no and a no-no. And I think that it had an effect upon her. I think that she was a very, very quiet, withdrawn, and lonely child. Fortunately, she's turned out to be a fairly normal, well-balanced individual as an adult. I'm not so sure, though, that this is the case with all children. Even in my experience, I saw some that were really, really suffering from some real withdrawal, real emotional problems. And I suppose with your background and your interest in this whole area, you have observed this and possibly even more.
Yeah, I agree very much with what you brought out. I think it's very difficult to grow up a normal child as a witness because there are so many things that you cannot do that everyone else around you does. And you are severely isolated from friends, from developing normally, socially. In my own case, the school that I went to, there was no witnesses. So I was not allowed to associate with anyone. I had to grow up by myself, so to speak. And I did not have any people that lived nearby that were young, about my age, and were witnesses. So as a result, I had to turn to other means to satisfy social needs, which is not easy. It's not easy for a witness to grow up in this environment. The thing that bothers me, I think, is the society does seem to be oblivious to this. They seem to feel, well, it doesn't matter. Just do the best you can, and Armageddon will be here any day, so it doesn't really matter. But it is true, I think they realize more and more it does matter, because young witnesses have many severe problems. And I think they realize now they have to respond to these in some way. So that's why they do have more and more articles about the problems of young people and how to deal with these. But no matter how hard they try, I think, as long as you have a situation where you see everyone else as evil, where you cannot partake in so many activities, in sports, in extracurricular activities, in student government activities, in almost all school activities except the minimum required activities, when these are all off limits, I find it hard to understand how anyone could grow up a normal child under these circumstances. Of course, many do later adjust. Many do overcome these problems they had as a youth. But it takes a lot of time and a lot of work, I think, to overcome the stigma that one has growing up a witness child. And it is a reason why many people who were raised witnesses have so many problems later on as adults. And I worked for the court for a number of years, and many of the individuals I worked with were raised witnesses. And it intrigued me how someone raised a witness could end up a murderer, a rapist, involved in some heinous crime. But I found many were raised witnesses and involved themselves in these crimes because they were so socially maladjusted that when they became adults, they were not adequately able to cope with adult responsibilities and adult life, and thus, because of maladjustment, ended up involving themselves in these crimes that they did, that I saw them involve themselves in.
You know, Jerry, with respect to the judicial committees and the type of things we used to have to handle, some of them were a little more innocuous than others. Cigarette smoking, while it is a dirty habit, of course, I'm not totally convinced it's a salvation issue. There were many other things, of course, drug abuse and many cases of immorality, things like that. But I remember a case in particular that stood out in my mind as being pretty unusual in certain respects because of the fact that this is, this supposedly fine Christian organization and what the fruitage would be of that. It was three young men in their 20s, actually, probably late 20s, and they were from our area here, and they went out to Palm Springs with revolvers, actually, and got involved in armed robbery. They stuck up a camera store, which was an obvious judicial committee arrangement, and it did result in a disfellowshipping. The three young men were disfellowshipped, of course, for that. It was a very clear-cut case, and there was prison terms involved and so forth. Did you, in your wider scope of examination of matters like this, did you find, or have you found that this type of thing would prevail in an organization like that?
Yes, I did find the same thing pretty much. I worked for the court, as I had mentioned, for a number of years, and in my experience there, I was shocked, actually, to discover that there were many individuals who were raised witnesses who were deeply involved in crime. And I explored to some degree why this is true, and I found when the witnesses discouraged higher education, when they had discouraged career advancement, when they discouraged an individual from developing him or herself, I found the result of this was people were forced to stay at the bottom rungs of society. Many witnesses were lower class, or at least lower middle class, and as a result they associated with an element which was heavily involved in crime. So I found many witnesses were dragged into crime or involved themselves in crime for various reasons. And I was quite surprised to find that there was even a number of cases that I worked with that involved brutal murders. We had one case where a young boy had robbed by gunpoint a paper boy, and the paper boy resisted, so he shot and killed the paper boy. There was another young witness who his family were very involved in the witness work, and he was involved in quite a number of rapes in the community. And finally he got a natural life sentence because he was seen as such a threat to the community that they felt it would be best that he put away in the prison for as long as he lived. And while working with these individuals, I had a chance to talk to many of them to try to find out why they involved themselves in these heinous crimes. And I found many of them were involved in such things